Adams, are you about to make a maiden speech?
Indeed I am, sir.
Okay, members, the courtesy that is extended on a maiden speech is being requested for the next 20 minutes as the MP presents makes his maiden address. Okay, MP Adams, you have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for the first time in this honorable house to say how humbled, appreciative, and proud I am to be here. And with that being said, Mr. Speaker, the first thing I must do is acknowledge that I did not get here alone. I'll avoid calling names as I'd inevitably miss out deserving people, but I must acknowledge 5 very special women in my life. Iona Brangman, Nathalie Adderley, Karen Rayner, Alexa Lightborn, and Yara Adams. Each of them inspire me in their own way and are a reminder of how blessed I truly am. But Mr. Speaker, there are certainly others. And so to the entire team, my family and friends, the Progressive Labor Party, and C19 branch, the well-wishers that didn't know me but encouraged me anyway, and of course, those that voted for me on October 1st, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you all. Now, Mr. Speaker, it's important that those listening understand that I'm not satisfied just having the job. My satisfaction comes from doing the job. I'm not here to just be a politician, I'm here to be an effective one. And so in order to do so, Mr. Speaker, in order to have valuable input into the decisions being made, I did some further research on this country, and in my quest, I learned about a unique group of people. And the more I read about them, the more fascinated I became. Mr. Speaker, I learned that these unique people did not discover this island, nor did they arrive here under their own free will, but rather were captured, transported, and forced to work here as free or cheap labor over 400 years ago. Shortly thereafter, Mr. Speaker, laws were passed in this very house, allowing these people to be considered property. Mr. Speaker, I'm talking about people actually considered someone's property. Chattel slavery soon followed, making it legal for their offspring to be considered property as well. So under this law, a master had the legal right to say, not only do I own you, I own you for the rest of your life, and in fact, I own your future children as well. Mr. Speaker, I could go on, but the truth is that was a long time ago. That was over 400 years. So surely times have changed, and so I continue to read on, thinking to myself, well, what about 200 years ago? It was then, Mr. Speaker, I read a book by a lady of this group. Her name was Mary Prince. And in this book, she told stories of her life in Bermuda 200 years ago. And Mr. Speaker, if you would allow me, I'd like to tell a quick story from her experience.
Continue, member.
She said one day, one of the cows had gotten away from where her close friend Hetty had kept it. And when their master found out, he got angry and ordered Hetty to be stripped naked, notwithstanding her pregnancy, and tied to a tree. He then flogged Hetty as hard as he could till she was streaming with blood all over her body. He rested, then beat her again and again. After some time had passed, Hetty appeared to recover, only to be repeatedly flogged, this time by both master and mistress, until one day her body and limbs swelled so much she laid on the kitchen mat and died, giving birth to her dead baby. And Mr. Speaker, the part of the story that struck me the most was when Miss Prince went on to say that all of the other slaves said that death was a good thing for poor Hetty. Mr. Speaker, when I read this, my heart sank. To know that a human being was treated in such a way on this island because of laws passed in this house where death was considered a good thing. And to know that these people lived like this for hundreds of years is absolutely gut-wrenching. But Mr. Speaker, that was a long time ago. That was over 200 years. Surely times have changed. And so I read on thinking to myself, well, what about 100 years ago? Mr. Speaker, that's when I read about the Department Company Act, which again was legislation passed in this House that forced many of these unique people to sell their property in Tuckerstown after they'd spent generations developing it into a thriving community. Imagine, if you will, your grandfather sacrificing his entire life for your father sacrificing for you, you then for your son, and just when things began to look promising for your son, a law was passed that took it all away. And Mr. Speaker, lest I forget the Hotel Keepers Protection Act, which allowed hotel and restaurant managers the right to refuse to serve these unique people without any justifiable reason. It was the UBP's E.T. Richards who stood in this House and said the law caused embarrassment, insult, and humiliation to these people. But Mr. Speaker, that too was a long time ago. That was roughly 100 years ago. Surely times have changed, and so I asked myself, how are these unique people living in Bermuda today? And Mr. Speaker, I could not believe it. Recent statistics show these very same people earn on average 30% less in income, have an unemployment rate 3 times their counterparts, represent 98% of those in correctional facilities and 93% of the homeless in Bermuda. But beyond the numbers, Mr. Speaker, the shocking part to this, to me, is that none of those numbers are a surprise to us. It's as if society has just accepted this as a norm. So the question is clear. When does inequality end and the true equality we seek begin? Mr. Speaker, I don't even know these unique people. But if they're listening, I want them to know that I've heard their story. They've been marginalized for far too long in this country, and I'll use my time in this House to do all that I can to help. Now, Mr. Speaker, here's where it gets interesting. There will be some that hear this and think I'm being negative. Some will say that I'm holding back progress because I'm bringing up the past. Some will even go as far as to say I'm encouraging division. But Mr. Speaker, that couldn't be any further from the truth. I'm all about unity, equality, and what's right for all Bermudians. Mr. Speaker, when the Progressive Labor Party says that it is focused on defending the rights of women, it does not mean we will turn our back on men. When we say we will better include the disabled in the community, it does not mean that all able-bodied persons should now be concerned. And so, Mr. Speaker, when we say we are here to help these unique people who have endured unspeakable circumstances, it does not mean that the rest of Bermuda will be ignored. Mr. Speaker, I will reiterate, I am all about unity, equality, and doing what's right for all Bermudians. But our history has shown that this will not be achieved by maintaining the status quo. Now, Mr. Speaker, as I close, it would be remiss of me not to speak on the other side of the coin, which is, as I see it, accountability. It's important that these unique people understand the part of emancipating yourself from mental slavery is recognizing the role you play in it. It's too easy to simply blame slavery, segregation, or racism for their current conditions. Too weak to assume that change will come by complaining from the sidelines. This government is committed to opening doors, but their success is largely up to them. Mr. Speaker, the Premier has been clear on his vision for fintech in this country. And yet I'm shocked to see that many will use their smartphones to check their social media and take selfies, but not use those same devices to learn about fintech and discover ways that they can take advantage of it. Mr. Speaker, when the health minister, in the midst of a pandemic, continues to push for universal health care, because this government is committed to achieving access to health care for all Bermudians. And we recognize there are over 4,000 under or uninsured in this country. The fact that there are at least 4,000 people championing the minister on regularly baffles my mind. Mr. Speaker, there are more people today that pick up the phone to complain about the price of groceries, but won't pick up the phone to ask about a co-op program designed for them to own the grocery store and set their own prices. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'll finish with this. I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve the people of Bermuda. Yes. I'm ready to represent all of the constituents of Pembroke West. And more importantly, Mr. Speaker, I extend my hand to those willing to join me in effecting real change, so that another young man doesn't have to deliver a similar speech in this house 100 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you.